over to you. Thank you again for joining us.
Okay. Okay, so hi everyone, I'm Laura and I'm going to spend the next half an hour or so just talking about my experiences so far in the Premier League, my journey, a bit about my role. Then I'm going to talk about what it's like being a female in a male industry, so a bit of a flip of the last couple of talks. And then I'm going to talk a little bit about how we've integrated our women's team into the men's club at Southampton. Okay, so I thought I'd start off by asking you to think about what you did on your Easter Sunday. It probably wasn't that interesting due to the lockdown, and I can guarantee it wasn't as cool as what me and my family did. So about halfway through the day, my brother texted and he was like, "Oh my God, get the TV on. Manchester City against Wigan in the FA Cup final is being played on TV." I remember being at the game at Wembley. It was the best game ever when Latics beat Man City in the FA Cup final. I was over the moon, as you can probably tell in the photo, and that passion and that drive for football is kind of how I've ended up where I am today. I've watched it and played it my whole life, nowhere near at a great standard, but it's just been a massive part of who I am growing up. The second part of who I am, or what's driven me to where I am, is that I'm a massive geek as well. When I was at school, I was really good at science and maths, and everyone always thought that would be where I'd ended up. That would be what I'd study at university. But what I realised is that I'm an introvert. I'm really shy. I'm really quite quiet. And the only time I ever come out of my shell is when I'm involved in sport. So I decided to choose sports science. And it was when I was at university that I got the opportunity to do my dissertation at Aston Villa. For me, this was like a dream come true. I get to study the subject that I love in a Premier League football club. And I can still remember the day that I drove up that long lane to Bodymoor Heath thinking, I will do anything to get a job here. I spent the next year whilst I was studying doing everything that I could to prove that I'm unique, that my skill set is something that would add to the team, and that as a person I would be an asset. And luckily, when I finished university, I got offered a job as the part-time GPS analyst. It was pretty good timing in that it was just about when the EPPP had come out, and to be a Category 1 academy, you had to have a GPS system. And I was more than happy to sit in front of a computer and learn how to use it. So after about a year of going in at 4 o'clock at night when everyone else had gone home and making GPS reports, and they offered me like a full-time internship doing the same thing, and which I did for a year. And then I got offered a full-time job at Saints doing the same thing. So I moved down to Southampton and spent a few months just setting up the GPS system, learning how to use it again, making reports. Moved on to doing different things like testing and monitoring, and then got more involved in delivery and assisting and being part of rehab and conditioning within the academy, learning off some great members of staff who taught me a lot. And then in 2016, I had the opportunity to move up to the first team. The idea at the time was that we build a network of experts around the team, so each person has a specialisation, and mine was in data. By that point, I'd spent a lot of time with databases and formulas and crunching numbers. So I was in a pretty good place to support the team in terms of performance data at the time. From then on, though, as well as being the data nerd or the numbers geek, I was also started to get involved in conditioning and rehab with the first team. And then at the start of this season, I've become a first team sports scientist. So now whilst my focus is still on the data, or that's what I lead on, I'm regularly part of the programming and planning of rehab, taking it out on the pitch, as well as on and off pitch conditioning. Throughout pretty much my whole career in football so far, I've been doing a PhD up until the end of last year, which was on workloads and injury in football. I started it when I started at Villa, restarted it when I went to Saints, and then I've basically just done 5 years of working 6 or 7 days a week and doing a PhD when I get home at night. So it's quite nice to have a little bit more spare time right now. Okay, so that's a bit about my journey or my background. I thought I'd just talk to you about what it actually means to be the first team sports scientist at Saints. So we're pretty lucky in that there's 4 of us, 4 full-time members of sports science staff in the first team. There's our head of sports science / first team fitness coach, who leads on the day-to-day movements of the squad, the planning and programming of training, their schedule, taking the warm-up, etc. Then we have our lead sports scientist who leads on rehab. So he will go through with the physios, the programming of the long-term rehabs, taking the end-stage rehabs, making it specific to that player. Then there's me. So I'm still focusing on the data side, any performance data that's collected for the first team and any processes throughout the club. And then there's our S&C coach who is in charge of designing individual gym programs, strength profiling, and delivering those sessions. Whilst we each have our own individualizations, we can all do each other's roles to some extent. Not only do we have that fluidity between us, but we're also involved in any of the other words that are written on the screen, making us general sports scientists, but with an area of expertise that we focus on. And that really allows us to support each other. So apologies if you watched the last webinar that I did. You will have seen this slide already. I couldn't think of a better way of just explaining how we program load. So for those of you that haven't seen it, at Saints, we program in 3-week blocks. So we have a deload week, a maintenance week, and an overload week. And the idea is that over the course of the season, we push the load capacity of the players so that what would initially be a high week will eventually be a deload week because they have an increased tolerance to load. So that's the general principle. I've just shown high speed running on there, but we do it for all our key metrics. And then what it means for me. So the graphs at the top there are like a replica of the one that I previously showed, shows sprint distance and decelerations, and this is just one player. To briefly explain the graphs, the red bars are weeks. The grey area behind is the average of what they did for the previous 4 weeks. And then the yellow line is the percentage between the two. So you don't have to be like a real maths nerd or interested in the numbers to get how you would program workload based on these graphs. But basically, if you look at the last 2 weeks, it's a deload, then a maintenance week. So the next week is going to be an overload week. We would overload at somewhere between 120 and 140% of your chronic load. So you could probably work out using those graphs what I would recommend for the following week for that player. Where my skill set comes in and my experience is that each one of those graphs, each player is very, very different. Each player has a different ability to tolerate load, a different training age. They might be about to go on international duty. They might be about to not go on international duty and be staying back at the training ground with no fixture. They might be regularly part of the team, or they might be regularly part of the subs bench, or regularly not in the squad at all. They might have just come back from an injury. Each one of those things affects how you program load for the individual. What I really enjoy is knowing the people and then knowing how the numbers apply. It's not just about the individual, but also the fixtures too. Are we about to play Liverpool and spend 90 minutes running our arse off? Or are we about to have 2 games within 1 week? Or are we about to have no games in a week? And how do we program that in? What point are we at in the season? Are we close to Christmas, so we have to have an increased tolerance to load? Are we around February, March time, we're out of the cup, and we've got a couple of weeks where we've got no fixtures? Can we program in a graduated deload? And not only does it change from a week-to-week basis or based on things like that, but also it changes every single day. So each training session, I'll go out on the pitch and monitor the session live. Ralph and the rest of the team will have targets that they want to achieve, and everyone knows what we're trying to achieve at the session. He'll regularly come over and check where we're at throughout the session. And whilst none of us believe in pulling a player out or massively changing the session on the spot, what it does help do is guide, can we add an extra game in, or can we change the duration of this game a little bit to get a bit more or a bit less out of it? Once we've then got the session outputs, how do we manipulate the rest of the week to make sure we stay on target if we've gone over or under what we're expecting for that day? So not only do I spend my whole time manipulating and working out the numbers and trying to plan training and periodize, but I also have to report and visualize some of the information that I collect. So here's just a couple of examples of reports that I would use. Top right is a GPS report for a standard day. So how much have they done and how does that compare to a game? Top left is within that session, one particular drill and how that breaks down per minute compared to a game, and also worst case scenario. So how does it compare to the most intense minute of a game? Bottom left then is the loading patterns of a player over a period of time, and then for that particular session. So there's accelerometers in the unit. You can kind of get an idea of the force output. I'm not massively convinced on the difference between left and right. What I do know is that most of these players I've been monitoring for 3 to 5 years. I know what's normal for them, and I know if it's a significant change from their normal. I'll flag it up if there's been a few days where they're significantly different to what they usually are. What I like about making reports or visualizations is, again, that it's so specific to the people. There'll be different reports for players, coaches, physios, S&Cs, whatever anyone's interested in looking at. Our GPS report is specific to the metrics that the coach likes to look at, that as a club we are used to seeing. Not only is it specific to the audience, but it's clear. The guys that use it regularly know what they're looking for. And I'd never just deliver a report on someone's desk or send an email without any notes or a conversation. Whilst I'll try and keep my notes pretty objective, the conversations create context and opinion behind it that gives more detail and more understanding of the numbers than just a report alone could ever do. Okay, so the last thing about what I do before I move on, we collect a lot of data throughout the whole club, not just the first team. I've given some examples of some data sets that we have there. It's not limited to that. What I find exciting, because of the way that I am, is that all of this information feeds into one big database, and it's just as easy for me to make a report on the women or an under 10 as it is for me to make a report on the first team. Not only that, but it's easy for me to pull in information about wellness and compare it to GPS or power testing with their gym. Anything that I want, I can compare across different metrics. It allows us to create a bigger picture. So we're not making decisions just on one measure or one metric, but on the bigger picture about that player. We can make comparisons between players, between squads, between weeks, and we can benchmark. So are we getting an under 12 ready to go into the under 13s? Are we getting our under 23s ready to be senior players? And then finally, it's not just the data that matters. All those numbers are great, but two people can have the same numbers and react totally different. It's about knowing the players. Like what Phil was saying earlier, do you know about their families? Do you know about what inspires them? Do you know about what makes them tick? It's all those things that matter. And that's what makes me enjoy what I do. Okay, so that's a little bit about my role. I just thought I'd go into what it's like being a female in men's football. Okay, so I'm hoping that I'm not the only person that thinks that working in football is like this wiggly line. The highs are so high, the lows they can be pretty low. It's a very challenging environment, obviously one that we choose to be in, but it can be difficult at times, it can be incredible at times. And I thought this would be a good way to represent what I find are my challenges and my pros, or what I enjoy. I'll start with the challenges so we can end on a high. So one of the things that I find pretty hard is getting past first impressions. As I said earlier, I've never played or coached at a high level. A lot of people who work in football have. In my industry in particular, and in the men's side of things, it's very male dominated, not just obviously from the players, but from a staff point of view as well. So as a relatively young female with no playing history and no coaching history in my background, it's quite difficult to get past the first impressions people might have. I've written it as a challenge, not as a negative. I totally relish the challenge of proving people wrong. And that goes on to my next thing, which is respect. Off the back of all those things I just said, it's quite difficult to earn respect in that environment. Quite often it's quite a closed circle. People know each other quite well. It's quite difficult to be a newcomer and come in and earn that respect, especially being a female in men's football. In my opinion, I think it's pretty hard. And then finally, the last challenge for me is, I know that I expected it, but there is a lot of testosterone in men's football, which means that it's very performance driven, they're high achieving, which is great. Sometimes it's difficult for people to admit that they're wrong, or that they're struggling, or that they don't know the answer. And I find that quite hard, particularly when I work with the players and I know that they're struggling or something's not quite right, and they can't admit it because they don't want to be bantered. That's quite difficult. And also for me, like, I'm quite an emotional person. I care a lot. And so it's been a big learning curve for me to toughen up, to take the environment, and to know when to use my emotions and when not to. But what are the benefits? Because if you can't tell from my voice, I love it. I really enjoy what I do. One of the reasons why is that I get to work with some of the best coaches and practitioners in the world. They've travelled everywhere. They've played at the highest level. They've got knowledge and experience that I couldn't even touch. And I relish the opportunity to learn from them all the time. It's an elite sport environment, so it's addictive. the elation of winning and the despair of losing, like, it never changes. You get hooked on that all the time. You're working with athletes who are at the top of their game. So in order to make a difference or to make an improvement, you have to be innovative, you have to be creative, and you have to get your standards high. I love that. I've put respect again because once you've earned it, the difference you can make is massive. If you can return a player back from injury and get them back out on the pitch, the respect and the trust that you earn between the two of you is invaluable. And that feeling that you get when you first hear the fans cheering their name again, like, you can't put a value on that. Also, on the other side, everyone knows it's a tough environment. It doesn't matter who you are, it's a challenge. And if you can be successful and if you can earn that respect, other people respect you for how you've acted in the environment. And then being part of a team. So it's really important for me. I really enjoy feeling like I'm making a difference as part of a team. Can I add my expertise to the expertise of people around me? Having a group of people that are all going for the same goal, that are all trying to achieve the same thing and supporting each other through. I don't think you get it really anywhere else in the same way that you do in sport. To have that camaraderie and that bond that you get, which leads me on to the last thing that I've written here, which is banter. I've put it right in between the pros and challenges and in between respect, because I feel that's where it lies. The hardest thing is if you don't have the respect, the banter can be brutal. It's proper men's changing room banter, and they will find a weakness. And if they find a weakness, it's a bit of like pack mentality. They'll go for you until you bite. And you definitely have to learn to be strong and give it back. On the other side of things, if you have the respect, the banter is incredible. You can be working in such a high pressure environment where you feel like you really have to work hard, but you have so much fun at the same time. I don't think I've ever laughed as hard as I have since I've been in a first team environment. And then finally from me on this is nothing grows inside a comfort zone. As I said earlier, I'm a really shy and nervous person. Being in this environment is really challenging for me, but it really brings me out of my shell. I learn every single day. And I thought I'd check. I'm not the only one. So I just thought about our sports science and medical department at the moment. 23% of our full-time sports science and medical staff who work with the men's side are female. Now, I know it's not 50-50, but I think that's pretty good for a male-dominated environment. It includes sports scientists, S&C coaches, physios, psychologists, soft tissue therapists, and all of these women chose to work in a male-dominated environment. So it's not just me. And then I thought I'd ask them, and not just them. So we have part-time staff, consultants, and people that work within the club that aren't directly in the sports science and medical team. Quite a lot of females at Saints. So I thought I'd ask them what it's like and why they chose to work in football. The stories that I got back, honestly, were incredible. There's so many inspiring people, and I didn't even realise the stories behind them. I couldn't really capture it all on slides, so I just picked out a couple of quotes and a couple of trends. Generally, everyone who works there loves football or loves sport. They like that the environment is fast-paced and exciting and a challenge. And then what's the best thing about working in football? So they all said things like being part of a team, making a difference to someone's career, having fun, contributing to what's on the pitch. It's really nice to know that everyone who works in football, even when it's challenging, loves that, loves being part of this bigger picture. And then yesterday I had a conversation with our head of girls and women's football, who's also the head coach for the women's team, Marieanne. And I asked her why she chose to come to Southampton and grow women's football there. And she said it's because Southampton is about the values and about the people. It's about developing the people that are there. It's about showing them that they are important. And the focus is on developing the game of football. It doesn't matter if you're an academy player or a senior player, if you're male or female, the focus at Southampton is developing the game, bringing the best people that can bring the best out of the players. And then I asked her what the best thing was about working with the team. And she said it's because of the strong vision that they have to be in the top flight. They have such a positive drive to achieve it and a real resilience to get there. For those of you that don't know the history of our women's team as it stands at the moment, a couple of years ago they applied for Tier 2 registration and were rejected. So they've had to work their way up the leagues to get to where ultimately they should be, which is towards the top level. This year they were top of Tier 4 with a game in hand when the league got cancelled because of coronavirus. So as it stands right now, they have to start again in Tier 4 next season to work their way up to the next tier and keep going with their progress. Whilst most people might see that as a negative or a pretty difficult journey, Marieanne was so positive and saying that the girls are so motivated because ultimately they know where they should be and they're all working together to achieve that goal. Again, it's that feeling of being part of a team. And then I thought I'd speak to both Marieanne and James, who's the sports scientist for the women's and girls team, about how we've integrated the men's and women's sides at Saints. So both teams and the academy are monitored in exactly the same way. They do the same testing protocols, they use the same GPS systems. Everything is the same throughout academy and senior, men's and women's. They train on the same pitches, they train in the same gym. Marieanne's office is next to Ralph's and next to the under-23s coaches. So that whole office, that whole corridor is constant technical conversations, making sure that everyone understands the Southampton way and learning off each other and all their coaching experience. Also, for both the men's and women's, there's a culture of bringing youth through into the senior team. Southampton Academy have always had a reputation for this, but now the women's and girls are showing the same reputation with a number of 16 and 17-year-olds playing in the first team currently. The great thing about that is by the time the women's team are into the top tiers, those girls will be more senior players with the experience to lead the younger ones coming through then. Okay, so that's it from me. I'm pretty much on time, I think. It's the first time I've ever done a presentation like that, so I'll be pretty interested to hear any of your feedback. I just thought I'd finish off with some take-home messages from me because I talk quite quickly. The data is really important. I love data and I love numbers, but unless you know the people behind it, it doesn't mean anything. And what matters is who you are and what you bring. I don't care if you're male or female, if you're old or young, if you have something unique that you can bring to the environment and improve performance, that's what we're all here for. And I will end with nothing grows inside a comfort zone. If you're currently working or you're currently somewhere where you don't feel challenged, you're not learning. Get yourself somewhere where it's difficult and it's hard and you can grow. That's it from me. Thank you.